close Mount Vernon Mayor Richard Thomas and Court Ricky Flores, RJ Flores at LoHud.com last fall. Accompanied by 4 lawyers, Mount Vernon Mayor Richard Thomas sat down with prosecutors and investigators at the state attorney general's office, trying to answer his way out of a criminal probe of his campaign and inaugural finances. It evidently didn't go as well as Thomas hoped. He was arrested in March and indicted 2 weeks ago on charges accusing him of stealing $12,900 in campaign funds and failing to report more than $75,000 in gifts or loans on his city financial disclosure forms. The Journal News, LoHud obtained a copy of an 11-page summary of the November 17 interview that was filed in court on Friday at Thomas's arraignment. The interview was conducted by Assistant Attorney General Brian Weinberg and Daniel Court, the chief of the Attorney General's Public Integrity Bureau. During the meeting, Thomas portrayed himself as the victim of circumstance. He couldn't get top-notch legal and campaign help when he ran for mayor in 2015 because he was facing incumbents and viewed as a long shot. In a traditional campaign there would be more staff in specific campaign-related roles, the investigators wrote Thomas told them during the interview. The campaign was a David versus Goliath situation, with Thomas's campaign as David and the opponents as Goliath. He also bemoaned his inability to get widespread support for his efforts to turn Mount Vernon around. His programs went unfunded, he didn't have access to the city budget, and some unnamed city commissioners were incompetent, he told the investigators. His campaign treasurer, who he relied on to handle the finances, was ill during the campaign and eventually died. He had a hard time getting all his receipts for campaign expenses back from her family. He acknowledged mistakes were made but mostly by those he relied upon, to do things in his best interest, according to the document. He seemed put out that he was under suspicion. Before the interview even started, when Weinberg asked the mayor if he had anything he wanted to say, he simply told them that he had come to them seeking help with Mount Vernon. Indicted, Thomas pleads not guilty. Details, what's in the charges against Mayor Thomas? Arrested, Mount Vernon Mayor Richard Thomas charged campaign expenses. Prosecutors confronted him about a litany of 2015 expenses on his American Express credit card that Thomas claimed were for the campaign. Expenses he highlighted on his credit card statement for them were personal. If they weren't highlighted, that meant he considered them campaign expenses. They questioned him about $105 he spent for a MetroCard. His lawyers thought it might have been for a 10-trip card, and he said any time he went into New York City that year he was doing some kind of campaigning. They wondered about a $72 payment to Citrus Lane. Thomas said it didn't ring a bell but that it might have something to do with technology. Weinberg suggested Citrus Lane was an online children's store. By photo. Brian Weinberg, Assistant Attorney General, Special Counsel to the Public Integrity Unit, hands papers to a court clerk during the arraignment of Mount Vernon Mayor Richard Thomas at the Westchester County Courthouse in White Plains on Friday, May 25, 2018. Photo, John Mayor, The Journal News. Then there were expenses for food. Lots of them. Thomas told them, I lived the campaign, that's what I had to do. There were also expenses from a Caribbean trip he took in late April 2015. Thomas said it was an oversight that he did not highlight expenses from that trip, particularly one for a restaurant, Seaside Cafe. However, just because he went away on a baby moon, the campaign. A spokesman for Thomas insisted in March that the payments were allowed because Thomas was entitled to compensation for all the work he did on the campaign. Thomas's lawyer, Randall Jackson, is expected to file a motion in Westchester County Court this week seeking to have the indictment dismissed. He contends that the Attorney General did not have the authority to investigate and prosecute the mayor over the matters for which he was charged. Jackson did not represent Thomas at the time of the interview in November and did not respond to an email or call seeking comment about the details of the interview. The lawyers who accompanied Thomas that day did not respond to phone calls or emails. Reimbursement questions. 2 of the payments to Thomas, for $6,400 and $2,500, were disclosed as reimbursements in his campaign finance reports to the State Board of Elections. But the $4,000 payment was not, and Thomas could not come up with a reason why it wasn't. He said he directed the treasurer, Maria Cercello, to go over the campaign filings with his campaign lawyer, Alan Goldston, to make sure they were correct. Thomas insisted that other than an August 2015 filing that he had to submit because Cercello was in the hospital, he never looked at the campaign filings before they were submitted. After Cercello died in December 2015, Thomas said Goldston would send him the information. Thomas would hit send to submit without reviewing the file because he could not open it because of the format it was in, he claimed. Goldston, who no longer represents Thomas's campaign or inaugural committee, declined to comment on Monday, citing attorney-client privilege. He did not respond to an email asking whether he was ever questioned by investigators. Spiezio and Amex payment. Thomas claimed he never knew until that conversation with prosecutors that Joseph Spiezio, a New Rochelle businessman and campaign advisor, had used 3 of his companies to pay a $2,800 balance on Thomas's American Express card in mid-September 2015. Thomas said he thought Cercello had paid it off from the campaign, but that there was a lot going on then and it was an impossible time. He insisted that he didn't know until 3 weeks before the interview that Spiezio also paid off more than $5,200 towards Thomas's credit card debt in November 2015. When Weinberg asked him how he could be reimbursed by the campaign for something he didn't pay for, Thomas told him that he gave everything to Cercello. He also suggested that they had long talked about him getting a stipend for all the work he was doing on the campaign. Spiezio declined to comment when asked Tuesday how he came to pay off Thomas's credit card bill or whether he had discussed it with him at the time. Inaugural committee involvement. Thomas claimed he had very little involvement in the Richard Thomas Inaugural Committee, and none in its formation. He said that after Thanksgiving 2015 he was told there would be an inaugural ball. He said he told Goldston that he would be following the lawyer's guidance, that the committee was compliant with laws, according to the interview notes. He also said that he was never involved in fundraising for the inaugural committee. But 7 months earlier, in April 2016, the Journal News reported on a series of emails showing Thomas was very much involved in raising money as the inaugural approached. In late December 2015, Thomas cited a fundraising goal of $200,000 and wrote that he was putting the hammer down on Mayor's advisory committee members to raise this money. He got a pledge of support from a major developer and Mount Vernon property owner, Joseph Simone, and then suggested that either Spiezio or the inaugural committee chairwoman, Roberta James, should ask Simone for a $10,000 donation and a commitment to contribute another $40,000. Spiezio responded by email that Thomas was the one who needed to make that call. It is unknown whether Thomas ever did, but Simone's company was one of the 13 major sponsors listed in the inaugural journal. According to the criminal complaint against Thomas when he was arrested in March, the inaugural committee made 10 payments totaling more than $45,300 towards Thomas's American Express card in 2016. The first payment in January 2016 covered a family trip to Mexico the previous month. Asked why the committee was paying for that, Thomas said that committee members had insisted on providing the trip as a gift. He was asked who specifically, and he said he would try to remember, but that it was a consensus among the committee members. When asked how the rest of the credit card payments followed, Thomas suggested the bank information from that first payment was automatically saved and continued to make the payments from that account. He claimed this was inadvertent. But he went on to suggest that some of the payments were appropriate because he was racking up expenses that city government should have been covering. He cited a trip he made to Washington, D.C., as one example. He suggested the city should reimburse the inaugural committee for as much as $45,000, and that he was trying to figure out how the city could pay him the $40,000 he claimed to have already reimbursed the committee. Board of Ethics. Thomas is accused of failing to disclose payments on his Board of Ethics financial disclosures in Mount Vernon that he got from Spiezio's companies, three other individuals, companies run by his brother, Butch, and his sister, Jacine, and the inaugural committee. According to the criminal complaint, the payments from his siblings, totaling $14,000, came in August 2016, a day after each of their companies received $8,500 from the inaugural committee. In his interview with the Attorney General's office, Thomas insisted that his brother and sister were being paid because of their efforts to improve the city, Butch Thomas for his work funding pop-up parties and Jacine Thomas for organizing the Arts on Third Festival. He said his siblings had given him money because he needed it to get a better mortgage rate when he bought a home. Thomas explained that he was having significant financial trouble because an agreement to buy the Douglas Place home he was renting had fallen through. He had expected his rental payments, totaling $150,000, to be used towards the $500,000 purchase price. Instead, Thomas bought a house down the block last summer and had to take out a hefty mortgage that he wouldn't have needed for the other house. Twitter, @JohnBandler, or share this story, https://www.lohud.com/story/news/local/westchester/mount-vernon/2018/05/29/Mount-Vernon-Mayor Richard